Archives of Prasar Bharati presents the timeless treasure of golden era.
Over the past 31 years, I've had the joy of traveling repeatedly to many corners of this vast subcontinent that is India. It is amazing to see how landscapes, culture, food, music, dances, and even languages change every few hundred kilometers that you drive. You see the highest mountains of the world, great seas, bountiful rivers, and best of all, a people whose thoughts and heritage go back a few thousand years. Join us on an enthralling journey. I am traveling again across the whole of India to bring you spectacular India.
One of the great ruin sites of southern India, one could say perhaps one of the great ruin sites of all Asia. It's a UNESCO site now, of course, but what is so very fascinating about Hampi is that unlike other royal capitals, it was sacked and abandoned and never again occupied to any extent, so that the ruins there preserve something of what the city was like in the middle of the 16th century. This you cannot study for, let's say, Delhi or other great cities because modern development has overtaken the sites. At Hampi, very little modern development has taken over. There's only one village really that has developed. The rest of the site is in this sort of wilderness. And what a wilderness! One of the most beautiful landscapes to be found anywhere in India. It's a granitic landscape. It's a sort of wild, rock-strewn landscape through which the Tungabhadra flows over rocks. It's a magnificent epic setting, and because water is available, there has been considerable irrigation. So in contrast to the granite rocks, you have richly irrigated fields of bananas and sugarcane. So there's this contrast of vivid green with granite.
The beginning of the 14th century saw considerable political disruption in South India and the Deccan. This resulted from the repeated attacks of the Khalji and Tughlaq dynasties from the north. Out of the chaos, the sons of a chieftain named Sangama built a new and powerful kingdom called Vijayanagara, or City of Victory. The Vijayanagara Empire emerged in the mid-14th century and soon encompassed most of South India from coast to coast. It drew a line across the Deccan and prevented the further expansion of the sultanates to the north. By the mid-15th century, the kingdom stretched from North Karnataka to Kerala and from the Malabar coast to Odisha. At Hampi, on the banks of the Tungabhadra river, was made the imperial capital of Vijayanagara. It was one of the greatest metropolises of the entire medieval world. Foreign travellers who came to the city could scarcely believe what their eyes saw.
This area is very much connected with two interlinking mythological systems. One is to do with Shiva and his consort Pampa, because this is a sacred place to Shiva. The other one is the Ramayana, especially the Kishkinda chapter of the Ramayana, where Rama and Lakshmana, in search of Sita, meet the monkeys. This is supposed to have taken place in the Hampi area. So the area has, I would say, a mythological importance. And this was relevant to a series of chieftains who wanted to become great emperors and who did succeed in this endeavor.
Today, the ruins of Hampi cover more than 30 square kilometers, and more than 500 monuments have been identified. One can imagine what a sight must have met Abdul Razak, an ambassador of Persia, when he visited Vijayanagar in 1442. He said, "The city of Vijayanagar is such that the pupil of the eye has never beheld a place such as this, nor the ear of intelligence ever been informed that there exists an equal to this anywhere in the world." Domino Paes, a Portuguese visitor to Vijayanagar between 1520 and 1522, says, "About the size of the city, I do not wish to write here because you cannot see all of it from any one place. However, I climbed on a high hill from where I could see a considerable part of it, and I must say that it was as large as Rome and very beautiful to the sight." Domino Paes also says, "The people in this city are countless in number, so much so that I do not wish to put it down, as it may be thought to be fabulous. This is the best provided city in the world. You will find here rubies, emeralds, diamonds, pearls, seed pearls, cloths, and every sort of thing which there is in the world to buy. And then in the evening, there are fairs in which common horses are sold," he says.
One of the most fascinating aspects of a study of this site is that here we have all different types of architecture. If you go to earlier Hindu capitals, let's say Tanjore on the Kaveri Delta, you go to Halebid of the Hoysalers, you can see almost nothing except temples. But if you go to Hampi, in the 14th, 15th and 16th centuries on the Tungabhadra River, not only do you find temples, you find fortifications, you find gateways, you find granaries, you find stables, you find the remnants of palaces, of audience halls, of ceremonial platforms, of pleasure pavilions, of bathing ponds. You have a whole range of different architectures so that you can get the best possible idea of what really this place was like. And it's all set in this enormous scale over about 25 square kilometers. And in this area, we have alignments of structures which are now ruined, which give us indications of the roads. So we've been able to work out the road system that converged on the central palace zone. And we've been able to distinguish an area that we call the royal center of the city from the sacred center of the city. So we are building up a picture of what really life was like at one of the greatest capitals of India. To this, we add the historical data that's available to us. Many of the temples and the other monuments there have inscriptions in medieval Kannada mostly, and this gives us information about when the buildings were built, who paid for them, which kings were involved. And then we have the accounts of the Persian, Italian and Portuguese visitors to the site, because this being one of the richest cities in Asia, it attracted a continuous stream of visitors who wanted to trade with the Vijayanagara kings. The kings were extremely interested in having horses, which didn't do well in this part of India, so the Arabs and later the Portuguese monopolized the trade and shipping of horses from the Arabian Peninsula to the west coast of India and then across and through the Ghats to Hampi. And we have reports by these foreigners of what the city was like at the time. And this provides us with a tremendously vivid idea of everyday life and life during particular ceremonies, especially the great Mahanavami, when the kings hosted this enormous feast with parades of animals and troops. Another factor which we must not forget is that South India was the only source of diamonds in the world until modern times. And these diamond mines were in the territories of the Vijayanagara kingdom. After 1565, when Vijayanagara was sacked and lost to the Vijayanagara kings, part of these territories came under Golconda, and therefore these so-called Golconda diamonds became known under this name, and this is where the Europeans were very interested. Now, you couldn't get diamonds in Europe, you had to come to South India, and Vijayanagara, and then Golconda in later times, became one of the places where you could buy diamonds. And this is, I think, another reason why this city was so very important, and stories about it circulated beyond India in the Timurid courts of Iran, as well as Portugal and Italy.
The Vijayanagar kings rebuilt the Virupaksha temple in the early 15th century at a site which had been venerated since ancient times. The main gateway or Gopura rises to about 170 feet. It is the largest Gopura built at Vijayanagar and a fine example of impressive South Indian gateways. A 13th century mandapa or hall in the Virupaksha temple has ceiling paintings which survive. These are in fact among the rare examples of mural paintings of the early period which remain in the country. The paintings are made on spiritual themes and are full of the vigor of those times. Next to the Virupaksha temple is a group of 8 temples of the 14th century dedicated to Jain Tirthankars. In fact, the kings of ancient India are known to have patronized the establishments of all faiths. And here we see that tradition carried forward well into the medieval period. In fact, the king of Vijayanagar also patronized mosques here at Hampi, and many who worked for him were Muslim. In the palace complex is a massive stone basement. This is what remains of a large structure called the Mahanavami Dibba. The Portuguese traveller Domino Paes writes that it was erected to mark King Krishna Deva Raya's victorious military campaign in Odisha. Originally, there may have been a gorgeously decorated many-storied pavilion on this platform. It is here that the king celebrated the 9 days of the Mahanavami festival, which marks the victory of Durga over Mahishasura. This was also the occasion when the king used to review the armies and check the preparedness for battle. The spectacular celebrations and parades left a deep impression upon foreign visitors who have described them in great detail. There are reliefs made on the side of the Dibba which show these great processions. The king's armies are shown, and so are hunters and dancers. The military strength of the Vijayanagar Empire was dependent on its cavalry. Horses were exceedingly important to the kings of Vijayanagar. The Portuguese traded extensively with the kingdom of Vijayanagar. They brought large number of horses from Arabia which they sold to the king here. In fact, this is a theme which features constantly in the friezes at Hampi. The Portuguese traders bringing so many horses, Arabian horses, before the king. In fact, There is one frieze of a Portuguese dancing with joy, and I wonder if it is because he has just made a very good deal. The joyous and exuberant life of the prosperous city of Hampi comes alive in these exquisite friezes. In ancient times, the subject of most Indian sculpture was the divine. Now, it is the here and now, life in the world as we see it, which became the subject of the artists. The men and women are made with robust bodies. Quite often, they are seen gesticulating. The coats, trousers, hats, beards, and upward turned moustaches of the foreigners are keenly observed and represented. This is the first time in India the royal pavilions were made with basements of stone. Previously, palaces were made of wood. The permanence of stone was reserved for structures dedicated to that which was divine, that which was eternal. Here in this time, we see significant changes taking place. There are a large number of palace structures and pleasure pavilions made out of stone which survive at Hampi.
We were able to understand little by little how Islamic architecture of the Deccan sultans came to influence the palace architecture at Hampi in the most unexpected way that we had not really understood before. So the elephant stables and the Lotus Mahal, these famous buildings at Hampi, are built in a sort of sultanate influence style, which was particularly evolved for the Vijayanagara kings for their pleasure, and was somehow identified with the kings themselves.
The Ramachandra temple was most probably made towards the end of the 15th century. The enclosure wall of the temple continues the themes seen in the friezes of the Mahanavami Dibba. The carvings here are finely finished and have a more controlled and formal presentation than the earlier ones. However, the liveliness of the Dibba carvings is not found here in this courtly style. The lowest panel shows elephants. The second has horses with grooms. And the third has parading soldiers. Above these are dancers and musicians, and the top panel shows the festivities of the Vasantotsav. The figures all move in a clockwise direction towards the eastern gateway of the temple. In the lower four panels, a seated royal figure is made. The rows of men, women and animals are all coming to pay homage to him. These panels display the power of the king, his wealth, his military forces and his queens. On the southern bank of the Tungabhadra river is a great Vaishnava complex. It is approached through a great chariot street and bazaar. A tank is constructed to one side where boat festivals of the deities were once held. At the end of the chariot street is the Vitthal Temple, made within a large walled enclosure.
The Vitthal Temple, which is an abandoned monument from the middle of the 16th century, must be considered one of the great showpieces of Hindu religious art in South India. The way in which this rather crude, roughly coursed material, this granite, this local granite, was fashioned to create the most complex architectural interiors, with columns, with cut-out colonnettes and sculptures all out of one block, is among the most amazing virtuoso performances of Indian architecture that we have.
A stone ratha, modelled on the wooden processional carts of the temples, is made before the mandapa. It had a tower above, which was visible till the 19th century. This is not a monolithic structure, but is made of carved stones.
Following some of the earlier models of Pallava and Chola architecture from Tamil Nadu, the temple at Vijayanagara was always considered as a planned complex with a wall around it, a monumental gopura or towered gateway on one side, and in the middle the main monument, the main temple itself, with a number of accessory mandapas or columned halls where all sorts of other activities could take place.
On the plinth of the main mandapa of the temple, there is a fine relief of Portuguese merchants with their horses. By this period, the main focus of attention had shifted from plinth reliefs to the many pillars made within the halls. Complex pillars with central shafts and clusters of subsidiary ones were made, often with three-dimensional leaping animals made on them. These rearing leogryphs with riders emerging from pillars became the hallmark of Vijayanagara art. These were also a source of inspiration for the Nayaka period which was to follow. The Vijayanagara pillars are carved with a rich variety of forms, drawn from mythology as well as daily life. A Lakshmi Narsimha sculpture carved out of a single rock symbolizes the spirit and power of the Vijayanagara Empire. It was established by King Krishna Deva Raya in 1529. The Narasimha avatar of Vishnu is part human, part lion. He represents the courage and vigor within us, with which we would combat the demons of our ignorance. And this monolithic stone representation, 22 feet high, is certainly one which reminds us of that courage and vigor within us. The great capital of the Vijayanagara Empire exhilarates the visitor. The structures and its art speak of a vigor and a zest for life. Indeed, Hampi was one of the most celebrated metropolises of medieval India. During its days of glory, it had few equals anywhere in the world. Perhaps the comment of Abdul Razak, ambassador of Persia in the 15th century, best brings alive the prosperous life of Hampi then. He says, "Roses are sold everywhere. These people cannot live without roses, and they look upon them as quite as necessary as food." What a wonderful city and culture this must have been.